Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the April 15th meeting of the Hyde Park Planning Board. Before I start the meeting, I want to first thank Supervisor Aileen Rohr and particularly Councilman Neil Krupnick, who is also the town's webmaster, for providing the technology and the direction under which this meeting will take place and to be broadcast. I also will note that this meeting is held under the auspices of Executive Order 202.1 by Governor Andrew Cuomo of the state of New York. Let me first call on each member of the board. Vice Chair Dexter, can you confirm that you are either alone or there's no one there present who will be trying to influence your vote?
I can confirm.
Thank you. Ms. DiNapoli?
I can confirm.
Mr. Oliver?
I can confirm.
Mr. Pickett?
I can confirm.
Ms. Wasser?
Confirmed.
And Ms. Weiser?
I can confirm.
Let me also start the Pledge of Allegiance. Allegiance. Liberty and justice for all. Thank you. That's what happens when you're going live. The first item on the agenda tonight is Verizon Cell Tower Anderson, Center for Autism. The applicants are seeking site plan approval and special use permit approval to locate a 62-foot cell phone tower deep within the confines of the center itself. At the last meeting that we had to discuss this, we decided we would do a site walk because in the environmental assessment form, it was noted that there is potential nesting habitat for American eagles. American eagles are still an endangered species in the state of New York. Last Saturday, members of the board met with an IT specialist for, there we are, for Anderson Center for Autism, who accompanied us. We perused the site with two members of the Conservation Advisory Council, Susan Maresca and Richard Maddox. All of us concluded after the meeting that there were no nests present. There was only one tree that looked like it would be suitable nesting habitat, which was a pine tree. It's located about 35 to 40 feet northwest of where the trees would be cleared. In addition, the area proposed for the tower is located to an existing cell phone tower, and it's highly disturbed around it. With roadways, et cetera. And this is not an area that eagles usually would like to land on. I wrote up a notice or a memo of our site walk and sent it out to the rest of the board. Does any member of the board have any questions about that letter?
No.
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 Hearing none, has everyone had a chance to review the environmental assessment form parts 2 and 3 that our consultant Liz Axelson filled out for us?
Yes.
Yes.
Then we're all in agreement. I think we're ready then to go to conclude seeker, which would be a determination of non-significance. And I don't know who has this resolution. I forgot to put it on my copy, sorry.
I do.
Thank you.
Resolution to adopt the determination of significance, Verizon Cell Tower Anderson, Staatsburg, South Micro, April 15th, 2020, resolution number 2019-37A, whereas, now therefore it be resolved that the planning board hereby determines that the project will not result in any significant adverse environmental impact statement will not be prepared.
Second.
Ms. Whitman, can you call the roll, please?
Certainly. Ms. Weiser,
Yes.
Ms. Wasser,
Yes.
Mr. Pickett,
Yes.
Mr. Oliver,
Yes.
Ms. DiNapoli,
Yes.
Vice Chair Dexter,
Yes.
and Chairman Dupree.
Yes, the motion passes unanimously. I'll also note that we'll be referring the plans to any involved and interested agencies, which include the Town of Hyde Park Zoning Board of Appeals, which they're required to provide an area variance because the pole should be located from the rear property line the same height as the pole. It can't be located there, so they'll be going to the Zoning Board of Appeals next. This will also go to the Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation, as well as the Town of Hyde Park Conservation Advisory Council. May I next get a motion to reset the public hearing for this Verizon cell tower at the Anderson Center for Autism for June 3rd, 2020?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second, Diane DiNapoli.
Ms. Whitman, can you call the roll, please, again?
Certainly. Ms. Weiser? Ms. Weiser?
Yes.
Ms. Wasser?
Yes.
Mr. Pickett?
Yes.
Mr. Oliver?
Yes.
Ms. DiNapoli?
Yes.
Vice Chair Dexter?
Yes.
And Chairman Dupree.
Yes. The motion carries unanimously as well. Thank you very, very much, colleagues.
I'm just
The
gonna
next-
recommend, we do have Mr. Alston in the waiting room. I don't know if you want to see if he has any additional questions or comments for the board before you move on to the next topic.
I'd be happy to entertain. Can we contact Mr. Olson to have him come on? Mr. Olson,
Yes,
I believe that you were watching us on YouTube, so you know it just transpired.
haven't been.
Ah, so we concluded seeker with a neg deck.
Okay,
Unanimously. The memo that I passed on to you about our site walk and noting no potential no nests or suitable trees for nests within the area of which you're proposing to remove them was put into the record, and we reset the public hearing for June 3rd.
perfect.
Any questions or comments from you?
No, thank you.
Then I guess I'll say good night. Thanks for joining us, and stay well and stay safe.
My pleasure. You too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Ms. Polidoro, for making that suggestion. I should also note that we have consultants with us, Mr. Sotero, Peter Sotero from CPL, our engineer, Liz Axelson, also from CPL, our planning consultant, Victoria Polidoro, Rodenhouse and Shaw Polidoro, our legal consultant, as well as Tad Moss, our zoning administrator. The next item on the agenda is Hutchins Staatsburg Storage. The applicants are seeking a site plan amendment to approve more units, more storage units to be located at 4920 Albany Post Road. This application was first received a while back. It was workshopped several times. The last workshop resulted in very extensive changes. So at our last meeting, we kind of had the training wheels on. This time we're going to take those off and actually have the applicants with us. We're going to do a PowerPoint presentation. The applicants are Robert Turner of Tinkleman Architecture, who'll be walking us through the PowerPoint with the changes, as well as Scott Hutchinson, the owner. Can we have Scott and Robert come out of the waiting room now? Hey, Scott.
Hi.
Is Robert available?
He's in.
Hi, how are you?
Mr. Turner, if you're ready to start the PowerPoint, you can, or to start your presentation.
Okay. Oh. Sorry, I didn't have audio for a moment.
Okay,
Are we all set?
we are.
Okay. This, of course, is Staatsburg Storage. It's for the addition of additional building storage units on the property. If you could go to the next slide. This is the proposed site plan that we are now currently, which we now currently have in front of you. We started way back in June of 2019, where we had a total of 10 commercial buildings that were going to be, I should say, 7 new buildings are being added to the site. There would be currently 3 existing buildings on the site. And so when you add 7, 3, we end up with 10 commercial buildings with a total area of 51,075 square feet. We have now cut that down and we've provided this more reduced site plan. It does have larger, I should say a greater number of buildings, but the buildings themselves are smaller. We still have the original 3 buildings, which would be your main building in the center of the site. We have the two which were built during phase 2, which are at the southern side of the property. And we are now proposing an additional 9 buildings that are distributed throughout the site. We have the 6 over on the northeast. We have the 1 over on the northwest, and then we have the 2 smaller ones that are tucked in against the building on the south. That adds up to a total of 50,725 square feet of storage building area for this particular project. With this, we've made, as you stated, considerable changes to the site plan in order to accommodate recommendations and suggestions that were made by the planning board. If you could go to the next slide, please. We'll start up in the northwestern corner. This is probably the more controversial area because there was a lot going on here. We had a larger building located on this site originally. Actually, it was 2 buildings that were kind of joined together by an overhang, and that had a total of 2,400 square feet. We've now reduced building 5 down to 1,350 square feet. We've also moved building 5 back so that way it aligns with the rock outcropping that occurs just to the north of that. And also we pushed it away from the building, and so that way where it happens to say rock down more on the lower side of the drawing, that's the location of the existing planting bed that was recommended that we maintain. And so by doing this change, we are able to keep the existing plants, and there's some smaller trees. In fact, there's some maples in this area as well that we will be keeping. By maintaining both the landscaping and the rock outcropping, we can use those natural features to somewhat screen the building as well as the parking lot that occurs in the back for these particular units or for uses within the building. Being where it is, these would be more towards people using building 5, or there is a commercial office use. We have a construction company. They do use the front portion of the building. They could use these parking spaces as well. If you could go to the next slide. This is a central area of the site. Originally, with the initial scheme that we had, we were connecting both the west and the east sides with a circulation drive lane. And in doing so, we were going to be needing to do a considerable amount of rock removal of that central rock formation that we have. And with this removal of that drive, we're then able to maintain that feature, which then can also be used to screen the buildings which occur on the east side of the property from view from Route 9. Also, in doing this, I know there were comments that were made about, are we keeping the rock walls? They happen to occur in that area as well, and so in most cases, we're able to keep a majority of the walls. It's just where we get closer to the parking area on the west side, and where we are putting a retaining wall over near Building 7, that we're having to do a little bit of reworking of the walls themselves, but those walls will be maintained as part of the site. If you could go to the next slide, please. This is the east, I'll call it the northeast corner. In this location, we had a fewer number of buildings originally, but the buildings were much larger. And so what they were ending up by doing, they were extending back into the rock outcropping itself, and that was going to be requiring rock removal, retaining walls. And so in doing the plan with smaller buildings and in rotating the upper building, which is building 11, we're able to keep ourselves away from a majority of that land formation. And so we've minimized the amount of retaining walls that we do have. And so we're working with a lot of the existing grade conditions along that particular area. Also, we've added building number, gotta be able to read this thing. It's the building down at the very bottom. I can barely read it on my plan. That building was added because we did reduce the size of building 5, as well as these buildings. So the square footage was incorporated into this building, and then each of the respective buildings then just kind of shifted up a little bit, but we were still able to keep ourselves within the site. The top building, which is building 11, we rotated that so that way we were able to keep the longer side in the north-south direction, which keeps the smaller side of that building facing South Cross Road, and so that's going to be the more visible side. So it does minimize the amount of view that you see of the buildings by making that little bit of change. We're maintaining the location of the emergency egress and access gate at the location where the current drive intersects South Cross Road. As we indicated, that's going to be having a gate on it that will have an access keypad that the fire department will have a key code that they can type into that to be able to gain access to the site, or if they need to get vehicles out of the site, they can use that access point as well. In the changes that we made with the building sizes, it's reduced down our area of disturbance to less than 1 acre. And in doing so, we're able to eliminate any of the bioretention basins that we originally had proposed along the east side, which all were occurring within that wetland buffer area. Also, as per the letter which I attached to the submission, we were able to eliminate the banked and deferred parking that was also occurring alongside of the drive lane that was in that wetland buffer as well. So it does minimize what we're impacting in that wetland buffer area. And the only thing that we're now doing is doing some grading. We're putting the drive lane through, and then there is going to be landscaping, as in plantings of trees that were requested by the New York State DEC. If you could go to the next page. There hasn't been a lot of change in this particular area. The only thing that happened is that over on the eastern side of our driveway, we originally had some deferred parking in that location as well. That eliminates those areas. And also there was going to be another retention basin in that area that also was eliminated. And so the only retention basin we are keeping on site is the existing one, and that is for use of the phase 2 development area, which is on the southern portion of the existing building. If you could go to the next slide. And then on this slide, it shows the 2 smaller buildings that we've added also to accommodate some of the lost square footage from reducing the buildings in the upper area. Buildings 4A and 4B. This just allows you to see where those occur and that they are behind the existing building, which is tall enough so it completely shields these existing buildings from view from Route 9. And this also shows the current existing vehicular gate, which is going to be remaining, and that's your access to all the storage buildings that are on the southern area and then on the eastern area of the site. If you could go to the next slide, please. This just, again, reflects how the lighting occurs on the property and shows that we are not extending over the property line in any way with the new configuration, being that most of all of the new lights are all building mounted, and they're kept at a very low elevation, so that way they will specifically be lighting up the drive lanes and asphalt area immediately in front of those respective buildings. And similar to what we're doing with phase 2, at a certain point in time, a majority of those lights will be shut down and a minimum number will be maintained for just providing some security. I know we have talked about possibly doing motion detectors, so if there's anyone does enter the site, lights will light up, so that way there would be illumination, but as to which ones would occur, that will need to be determined. Next slide, please. This just shows the landscaping and how we adjusted it to accommodate the new configuration, especially in the area of Building 5, that we did slide things over so that way we were able to maintain that existing planting bed. As per Liz Axelson, I will be identifying what I can in regards to the plants in that area, and I will be showing them on the landscaping plan, and I'll call them out as existing plants in that location. Next, please. This is the vehicular maneuvering plan. Again, it's just to show how the vehicles, which would be your fire trucks, will be maneuvering on and off of the site. We did show the vehicles coming from the south, which happens to be where the largest of the fire trucks would be coming to any fire that could be occurring on this property. So that's why we were focusing mainly on that southerly direction for the vehicles. Any of the smaller ones are easily going to be able to maneuver around through the property because they're more agile and more, I would say, more maneuverable than this particular vehicle. But you can see how they can access both of the existing drive lanes, and they would then have to back their way out of the parking area that is where building number 5 is. And when they access the site to get to the rear side of the property or the east side of the property, that's where they would then access or egress the property through the new gate, and that's at the northern portion of the property. Next slide, please. Also, as one of the recommendations per Liz Axelson, we restored the information regarding the Blanding turtles, and I know Mark Graminsky, he expounded upon the various components that she was looking for, and so this occurs on this page, and this page also has the New York State DEC landscaping requirements that they wanted us to provide as part of this project. Next slide, please. This gives me a time just to kind of go over. Liz nicely circulated to us back at the end of March a memorandum, and so we've reviewed those comments that she have made, and a majority of those comments I'll be able to incorporate the items into our submission set that we will be making. I just want to point out that item number 3, which was revised sheet PZ 102 to show and label customer access gate for proposed building 5 and refer to the detail. There is no gate that is going to be occurring at this particular location. And so that comment will be addressed as such. Um, Again, 4, 5, those are things that I need to just add to the drawing. Some of them happen to be shown, but I guess maybe it wasn't as clear. So I'll relocate those notes so that way they are more visible. Number 7 is additional notes that need to be added. Number 8 requests a lighting schedule for the existing fixtures, A and B. That I will make sure I add and put on that sheet as well. I need to correct the planting count on the landscape plan, and I see why I missed those 10 items. We dropped the tag off of one of those, so I'll make sure that's added as well. I'll make reference to the bioretention drawings that are located on DT 102 as well as C7 on that sheet to assist in locating those. Number 10, which was making reference to DT 102, it requested that a plant list for the bioretention pond be provided. That happens to be included on that sheet.
Right.
We're using what's called a New England wetland plant seed mix, and there's a schedule as to what plants are all included in that seed mix, and it's just kind of something that's spread over that area. There's no specific number of plants, it's just whatever will grow from that seed mix is what will come up in that particular location. Item number 11, we did take a look at her recommendation of providing parallel parking spaces in between buildings 7, 8, 8, 9, 9, 10, and 10 and 11. This would then add a total of 10 new spaces that we're able to provide as part of the project. And so we will put those on the drawings, and then I'll make the changes to the scale information that's also on the proposed site plan sheet, because this will change then our actual scale of the project. Originally, that location where we were showing the parking without, I should say, the parking that is provided, not including the deferred and bank parking, it increases us from 58,335 to 59,955. So I'll pick up those changes and show that on the drawing as well. I know number 12 also goes back to discussing about the scale of the project. It pretty much covers what I just went over in regards to the addition of those 10 spaces. And that also continues on to number 13. I'll pick up the changes regarding the additional 0.78. I'll get that removed from the building, and that was item number 14. And then we'll pick up the areas needing to be identified regarding the proposed areas of disturbance on C2, C3, and C4. In regards to, then we move to code-related items. Show and label any directional signs. All signs that we have on the property right now are the ones that exist and will be occurring. On this sheet, she also asked that we show the property owners that are across the street, I should say across South Cross Road from the property. I know currently I have that shown on PZ 101. I'll just take that information and add that to PZ 102 as well. And that pretty much wraps up any of the comments that she has on the project.
Robert, I want to thank you for that excellent summation. I also want to thank both you and Scott for being able to kind of turn on a dime and turn your presentation into a PowerPoint so we could show it on our virtual way. And last, I want to thank you, Scott, Mr. Hutchins, for taking the interest in continuing this development project, particularly during this uncertain economic time. I'm going to here just insert a quick housekeeping note so that anyone in the town who might be watching this on our Channel 22 will learn this. We were just informed yesterday that the sake brewery, the sake manufacturer, is being put on hold. They're not abandoning the project, but right now, a lot of their business is tied up in hospitality because it's more of a high-end sake. They don't sell as much through liquor stores. It's through restaurants, tasting rooms, hotels, airplanes, etc. So because the hospitality industry income has trickled down to basically nothing, they're going to put this on hold. So if construction can start again, not essential, it will likely take a while before this one gets back up and going. So it's a pleasure to have someone still interested in doing the project. I'm going to go, as always, to our consultants for comments. And let me start, as usual, with Ms. Axelson. Comments?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up quickly. I know that I may have discussed this with Michael and a couple other board members. I had read the letter about deferred parking and what happened in the last round, and that's how I crafted my comments about deferred parking and why we ended up saying, show us a few parking spaces there. And then I guess we're looking for some notation indicating how would the site be examined later to see if additional parking is needed. My gut tells me there may not necessarily be parking needed, but I know there were concerns about how that would be handled, and in particular, how the zoning administrator, how Tad Moss would handle that. So I know we're looking for plan notation, but I'm also looking for a little bit of feedback maybe from Rob or Scott, or also planning board members about their feelings about deferred parking.
If I could leap in here a moment, Scott and Robert, one of the things we discussed at our agenda meeting was we observed, all of us who live here and go by, we've never seen a lot of people park there. We also, when we've done our site walks, have noted that people tend to park near the location of their storage unit. And that's usually kind of what we'll call temporary parking or short-term parking. So what was discussed was, instead of having you show, Robert, the additional spaces, which would add to scale, that instead perhaps you could show striping of areas where you think people should be parking temporarily and with possibly a sign. That wouldn't be a defined parking stall, so it wouldn't actually add to your scale. But that way you could kind of, not force, but to gently push people who are coming in to say, this is where you should park. You could have that by any of the sides of the buildings. I'll note that myself, when I looked at buildings 7 through 9, they also have this series of very small east-facing units, which means that I would take it people would park in the north-south access. That north-south access is 25 feet and 1 inch wide, which means that it could easily accommodate more than one car. People are parked there. Maybe that's something you could also, though, show as some striping in through these areas where you think people will park logically, where they don't have defined parking like in front of Building 5. And when we'll ask, as just Liz said, for everybody else in the planning board to weigh in on their thoughts about parking as well. Robert, do you want to add anything?
I think that it's a great idea because it's kind of almost like identifying a fire zone.
Yes.
Yeah, but here it's like a parking zone, and those could be easily marked out on the asphalt at the various locations. And so it does kind of identify this is where you should park, so people aren't just parking wherever they feel like around the site.
Good.
Can I just jump in for a sec?
Sure.
So in the past, we reviewed banked parking, which is where the board studied the parking as if it was going to be built, but then we didn't require it to be built. So our whole review incorporated those extra spaces. Moving forward, the applicant has requested that we not include any extra spaces in those study, but instead was looking for some kind of mechanism to do that review in the future. And I think that's very complicated, and the board can't approve the future parking without actually studying it. So instead, I'm going to ask the board members tonight, and this is following up on what Liz said, to discuss whether you think those extra parking spaces are even needed. And Michael, chairman, has suggested a workaround with striping of areas where it could be parked. So do we need those full banked parking spaces in the future, or are you willing to waive the requirement for those extra spaces? Because I just don't think that the applicant's suggestion is doable. It sounds good, but it's actually quite complicated.
And I will conclude on this little topic before we go on back to Liz, that what's important to remember is that where the banked parking was proposed to be located will now be the entrance drive to Building 5. They've actually added more parking spaces associated with Building 5, with it, as Robert noted, Mr. Turner noted, could be used for the office space. That's what those bank parking spaces were initially for, was in case there were more uses in the main building. Last, everyone's had a chance, as I said, to take a look and see how the site's utilized for storage, and it seems as though no one parks for a long, long time. So as Victoria noted, please everyone weigh in on your ideas of parking and the idea of striping to show temporary parking areas, we'll call them. Liz, let me go back to you. Is there anything else you want to add?
Well, after we hear about parking, obviously I'll want to know whether or not, if we're just going to dash them and they're not going to be counted towards scale, that's important to know before, Rob and Scott make their submittal. So
Right.
that input. And then I know there's another issue of concern, and that had to do with some discussion about that Building 5 was moved back. And I'd like to hear the board members weigh in about whether they're satisfied with how it moved back. And just with the footnote, there is sort of a rock outcrop that is somewhat visible from the road, but where Building 5 is going is what appears to be a low point in that rock outcrop, so that the remaining design looks like it's preserving the ends of that rock outcrop. So I'll be looking for input on that.
Thank you. Mr. Sotero, any comments?
Comment would be, as everybody was talking about Building 5 and the rock outcrop, Scott, do you know where your existing well is for
I
the?
don't have a well. We have public water.
Oh, your public water. Okay, excellent, excellent. Okay, I was just concerned about rock excavation and any impact on a well. So, all right. I mean, as far as any other comments, we really don't have any. The site disturbance is less than an acre, so they don't need a stormwater pollution prevention plan. And Mark Graminsky's plan does show soil and erosion control measures. So, at this point, I think all the engineering comments that we had before have been addressed.
Thank you. That's wonderful to hear. Ms. Moss, do you have any comments to add?
No, no comments. Thank you. I do like the redesign. It stays further away from the wetland. The temporary parking has been moved away from the wetland, and I think those are good changes to the plan.
Those are good. Those are comments, actually. So thank you for adding them. Ms. Polidoro, any other comments you'd like to add? Victoria?
There we go. Sorry, I was muted. Not on the design, but on procedures.
Yes.
If we're at a point where the board is comfortable sending this to county planning and sending it to other involved and interested agencies, we have a resolution prepared for that. But I do want to note that the 30-day time period for circulation has been told, we believe, by the executive order. And so to be conservative, we should wait to hear back from the agencies before declaring lead agency.
We agree. I mean, we can't wait forever, but because of the suspension of the timelines by the governor's executive orders, we will have to give them more than 30 days necessarily. I will note that the agency that is most probably important in terms of the response, the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, the applicants have been meeting with them, as we know from correspondence we received with them. So this won't be a new application. And as I recall, one of the last letters that they received said that they were waiting for notice by us to be lead agency. So I'm assuming that we'll move forward fairly quickly, but we don't know about the other state agencies and what their operating terms are right now and how long it takes. So thank you for adding that. Anything else, Victoria?
Not for me.
Then let me start to my virtual left, if I can call it that, and call on Ann Weiser first for comments. Ms. Weiser?
Okay. So I'm actually quite happy with the new placement of Building 5. I think that I really appreciate that you did that. And I also appreciate that you reduced the square footage. And given the nature of your business, I don't think we need extra spaces, and it's simply fine to strike them.
Thank you. Anything else?
Nope.
That was really succinct. Perfect. Thank you. Mr. Pickett, comments?
There was discussion about having a split rail fence or something around the retention pond to kind of delineate it, maybe protect it a little bit. It was in the area of the shed, I think the shed south. Any more discussion on that?
Mr. Turner?
On our part, that is our existing retention pond. And if you're concerned about anything going on with it, I'll have to speak with Scott as to how he might want to address that.
It's not a big deal. If we want to put a fence around it, put a fence around it. Trust me.
Yeah, no, I don't want to make a big deal out of it. It's just that it was on the south side. There was this discussion about it, kind of protecting that area going towards the wetlands. So just something reasonable.
Yeah, the only challenge in putting a fence there is that snow plowing occurs from a west to east direction, and they push all the snow over, honestly, into that retention pond. So that's used as snow storage in the winter. So that would be the only problem with establishing a fence in front of it.
Okay. All right. The other question I had was on building 4A and 4B that you're adding. Was there any HVAC work or anything going to be done for that, or anything up on the roof that you might see from Route 9?
No.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay. And then the last two comments, I think the parking identification for the temporary guidance is good, and that waiving a requirement for bank parking.
Thank you. Are you okay with where Building 5 has been relocated and where it's centered to?
Very much so. Yes.
Thank you, Brent. Ms. Wasser, comments?
Yeah. First, Rob, that was an excellent presentation. I wish I could have had you walk me through that on these reduced size drawings when I was trying to compare back and forth. It was a lot of changes. I have a question regarding Building 5. I went through the drawings, I went out yesterday, again, got out of the car, walked around, and there are 2 stakes in the ground delineating Building 5, what would have been the western edge of the original submission. And what I couldn't tell from the drawings, because they're reduced set, so I couldn't scale it, how far back from those stakes are you proposing that west end of Building 5?
I'd have to take a look and just to re-verify how far we did shift that whole building back. And I can provide that information to you.
Well, so I'm really, I don't have an issue with, I'd be comfortable waiving the requirement on the deferred parking, and I do appreciate that there's less impervious pavement on the whole project. But I am still having a problem with that west end of Building 5, because if I look at the drawings, and I think Peter Liz just mentioned it earlier, and that whole elongated natural berm, it looks like you're siting the building into the low point, but that there's really no way that you're not going to disturb that berm. It's still too close. And I understand the goal is to have that west gable end with the 3 storage units look very visibly like a storage business. But I'm not comfortable with it, not understanding how much further back from those stakes it is.
One of the things,
I'm thinking 15, 20 feet back, and there's room to shift it back toward that stone wall and still have it visible. So that's my comment on Building 5.
okay. I know I can take a look at that. I know one of the things that we were working with in that particular area is trying to get it in between, so we weren't impacting the existing rock outcropping too much. But we definitely did not want to impact the existing landscaping, and so we were kind of fitting it in between both of those particular items. But I will get back to you in regarding how far we moved it back. I know it was originally like about 15 feet. I think it was shifted back from its original location.
I just scaled it roughly. So in the original proposal, building 5 was at the same front line as the existing 2-story building.
Correct.
It's now been pushed back so that it aligns up with the rest of the front of the building.
Well, it's still forward of the building. It's still forward
It's
of it.
slightly forward of the building.
It's forward of the back of the main portion of the building. The entrance to the most prominent bump out, it looks as though, if I measured correctly, it's about 16 feet back from where it was originally proposed.
That sounds about right from what I can remember.
Liz, were you going to say something that would help me?
I'm just looking at the partial site plan part of the presentation, and there's a marker from the front property line. It looks like, Robert, you must have marked it, 53.6 feet back from the property line is the front of building 5. So it's over 50 feet
Well,
back.
yeah, that would be harder for me to just quickly assess going out there. It's been my concern from the beginning, and it's still my concern. I wouldn't have a problem moving this on for circulation with the understanding that that is still an open item for me. And I'm not done with that. I'm not comfortable with it quite yet.
That's perfect. Any other comments? Anything else, Stephanie?
No, that's it.
Vice Chair Dexter, any comments?
She's muted.
Anne? If we can
Anne's
unmute.
muted.
She's trying to get her,
Where's my scale?
Okay, am I back?
Yes.
I felt like I was turning it off and it kept turning on. It was very weird. First of all, I want to really thank my colleagues. You have really excellent input. And first thing I want to cover is the parking. I agree. I think the nature of the business doesn't require additional. I'm a little concerned about striping because I think we're all trained that striping is a no-no. So, I don't know, maybe if you change it a different color, I don't know. I want it to be park here, not don't park here and block the lane. So whatever you can come up with, but I think people will naturally, I'm thinking to one of the original storage units here in Hyde Park, which is at the top of Teller Hill, put in here probably like 40 years ago. I don't think anything is striped through there. I think people just park, they try to get as close as they can to their unit, and I'm not even sure you have to tell them where to park. I just think maybe if anything, just say something like, don't block the drive aisles.
Good point.
So that's my parking comments. Building 5, I really do appreciate that you have pushed it back, and I do understand the significance for your business. I think my question is, we do have elevations of that one, don't we?
Yes.
Yes, yeah, the elevations are included within the set. I did not include them in the PowerPoint.
Okay, I have not been to town hall lately, so I haven't seen that. But I was thinking about that for the county planning as well, that they would need to see that. But I feel like it's kind of a branding thing, and if it's just the one building, and it has been pushed back, I do agree with Stephanie. Is if it's pushed back and shifted a little bit, yet you still have to take away some of the rock outcropping, I would be concerned. But from what I can see, it kind of matches what we asked you to do. So I think I'm okay with what you've done. And I do really like what you've done in the back, tightening everything up, making buildings shorter. I don't mind that you've added, the building all the way at the end, the buildings all the way at the end. I think it makes sense. It'll look neater and more cohesive. So in general, I'm really happy. We're a picky bunch, but you guys have really done a lot to meet us where we would like to be. It's hard to make 100% for anybody, so I'm personally quite happy with this.
Just because you were asking about the distance which things were set back off the property line, I had a set of drawings. The thing is, I couldn't find a scale, so I kind of worked off of proportions here. Originally, when we had buildings, it was 5A and 5B. The western side of that building was about 20 to 22 feet off the property line. And now we're 53 feet 6 inches back from the property line. So we've shoved it back over 30 feet from its original location.
So you're telling me the stakes that I saw on the ground yesterday were 20-some feet back from the property line?
Those stakes, I was wondering if maybe those were ones that we put in there during kind of an in-between phase, because I knew I have a set of drawings here that shows the building. It was a little bit further forward from where we have it now. And so that probably was that location. And I guess we've now shoved the building back even further than where those stakes were. But I'm going to drive by there tomorrow just to check that out.
Bob, those stakes were put in for the walk around.
Right, in September.
And then at that point is when we were asked to push it back even further, and we did. I've just never pulled the stakes out of the ground.
Right, and so my question was, because those stakes are sitting right at the outcropping, right? So the question is, how much further back is it from the stakes? Because that's just easier for me to understand, because I have the smaller set and couldn't scale it.
So what I can do is I can go and take some measurements and shoot that information over to the, I guess I'd send it over to Mike and Cynthia, and then they can circulate it around.
Yes.
If you've pushed it another 15 feet past those stakes, further east, then I'm probably okay with it. I just couldn't make that decision yesterday. I couldn't tell.
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Oliver, comments?
Firstly, I'd like to thank the applicant for their redesign efforts. I think that they've done a great job, and I'm fine with where building 5 is. And I have no issue with the parking. And maybe most importantly, I want to thank the applicant for continuing to go forward with this project during these crazy times. So thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Ms. DiNapoli, comments?
Yes. Good evening, everyone, in this new world that we live in. Though I'm starting to get used to it. I want to thank Scott and Robert for their amazing job and all the work that they put into this. It is so refreshing to see someone hearing the comments and going forward with that. With regards to the additional parking, the bank parking, I agree with everyone. I don't think it's necessary. I hadn't thought of it until Ann Dexter mentioned the idea of not even doing the striping.
Yeah.
I would be fine with that. There really is I don't think it really needs. I'm going to sidetrack for a second and ask that with these additional buildings, does a different snow banking storage need to be considered with the new buildings? It was really just a question.
You're referring to the ones in the northeast by South Cross Road?
Yes, with where it ends at number 11.
Okay, yeah,
That in between those buildings, the snow is going to have to be back dragged
correct.
back out into the traffic lane, and then it'll be pushed to the east.
Okay, fine. And I thank you for that. The building number 5, Robert, after you do the measurements, could you go back and stick with the stakes there reposition the stakes so we can see exactly where this new building is? I think that would be tremendously helpful. And then if Scott, if you don't mind, if we, just on our own drove by one day and looked at it,
Help yourself. Just wait for
Thanks.
Bob to tell you that he's done, though.
Yeah,
Right,
no.
right.
I mean, give me a few days. I'll probably have it done by the
There's no
weekend.
rush.
so.
I mean, right. Because that will help me to decide at my end about this. My other question was driving south from, I should say, coming from the north, coming south, it seems very bare. Is there a way you can maneuver around some of those plantings so that there are some plantings on the north side between yours and the animal hospital?
Yeah, there's going to be a fence there too. Probably think in terms of a black, just rail fence like you'd see around somebody's swimming pool. Right,
Okay.
so that'll be on that side. And I think, Bob, don't we have some plantings that are going to be along that fence?
Well, we have some plantings that, because we have the fence stopping at the face of the building. We
Right.
don't have it extending all the way back, but
On the side. And it was just really from the visual point of coming down Route 9, it doesn't have to go all the way to the end. That would be a waste of time and money, to go all the way back. But just so that it would soften the visual would be more appealing.
what I'd like to do in regards to, before I give an answer as to what we can and cannot do, is because there's a rock outcropping there, you're going to be kind of limited to what types of plants are going to be able to grow in that particular area, because they're going to be limited to how deep the roots can get. So let me take a look at that to see if it may be more of a, because like we have the rose bushes in the area on the west side. Maybe those might be able to be extended around to the north, but I'd rather look at the site before I go providing an answer.
Okay.
Bob, you might also consider just a low-level berm on the west side that's planted on top.
I mean, that could be the other option, yeah.
Right, so that you put 1.5 feet of topsoil for something to grow in.
I'll look at that, yes.
Okay. And thank you. Rob, take your time about coming back to tell us when we can look at the stakes. It'll probably be the highlight of our week.
Probably.
Hey, just remember, one at a time, social distancing.
Yes. Thank you.
So I have no additional comments. Everything has been covered by my esteemed colleagues as usual. And we've also been discussing this application for a long time now. So just to highlight some of what we've heard today, you heard a majority of the board say that they're pretty comfortable with the location of Building 5, but 2 would still like to see it staked, definitely, so we can see how far back it moved. I'm going to take a point here just to note that our code requires that actually buildings are supposed to be as close to the front of the property line in every business district, but I think it'd be inappropriate to have it sticking out in front of the whole big massive building. Also, we've all agreed unanimously that the banked parking, getting rid of that is fine, and that we don't need to have delineated parking spaces.
Okay.
I want to make sure that I credit Vice Chair Dexter, because actually, and you're right, when we see striping, we think, don't park in there, don't go in there. So it's actually not a good idea to stripe it, you're right. But maybe to have just signs saying temporary parking allowed here, or short-term parking, or something like that, to encourage people where they should be parking. I'll also note that, again, you put in, I think, enough information here that we can circulate tonight. We're prepared with the resolution. I didn't hear from anybody that they weren't prepared to move forward. And Stephanie said that because even if we relocate slightly Building 5 or something else, she's still fine with moving this forward. So who has this resolution? I'm sorry, I forgot to write that down.
I do.
Can you go ahead and enter it into the record? Thank you, Diane.
Oh, I do.
Oh,
And
That's okay. Resolution typing action and referring the application to the Dutchess County Department of Planning and Development, HUTCHINS Staatsburg Storage, LLC, April 15th, 2020, resolution number 2019-20. Whereas, now therefore be it resolved that the planning board hereby, 1, classifies the project as an unlisted action under seeker. 2, declares its intent to serve as lead agency in a coordinated project review and directs its secretary to circulate notice to all involved and interested agencies. 3, directs its secretary to refer the application to the Dutchess County Department of Planning and Development pursuant to Section 239M of the General Municipal Law.
Is there a second?
I'll second that. This is Brent.
Thank you. And can you call the roll, Ms. Whitman, please?
Certainly. Ms. Weiser,
Aye.
Ms. Wasser,
Yes.
Mr. Pickett,
Yes.
Mr. Oliver,
Yes.
Ms. DiNapoli,
Yes.
Vice Chair Dexter,
Yes.
and Chairman Dupree.
Yes. The motion carries unanimously. We need 3 copies because this will be sent to DEC, Roosevelt Fire Department, and Hyde Park Conservation Advisory Council. 4 copies. Sorry.
How many
I'd like
copies,
to
board?
point out- Yeah, I forgot to do this earlier, but I want to point out that the question of the entrance, even though it's an emergency entrance only off South Cross Road, was a subject of much discussion at the very beginning of this application process, and that we have the approval of both Roosevelt Fire Department as well as Superintendent Howie Fisher, our highway superintendent, about the location being exactly where it is, and it only being used as a gated entry for emergency egress and ingress. That noted, should we just sort of placehold this out for about 6 weeks, so we give the applicants an opportunity, or the involved agencies the time to respond?
I mean,
That's
that's
directed.
fine unless the applicant has a question that they want to come discuss prior to that.
Which we can add them anytime on that one.
Right.
Scott and Robert, what would you like to have us do?
Move on.
Yeah, I'm going to try to move this thing on as quickly as possible. The only question that I have is if you need 4 additional copies, is town hall closed, and how do I end up by getting copies to you?
There's a Dropbox. I'll defer. Let Ms. Whitman answer this. She probably knows better than me.
I think you're correct. There's a Dropbox, but we could talk about it offline, Scott, and figure out arrangements.
Okay.
Okay.
And one more quick note, Scott, I'm sorry, Rob. You know that my comment 11 to add those parking spaces is, you don't need to address that.
Okay.
And accordingly, comment 12A, you wouldn't need to change the scale in regards to those.
Right.
Okay.
So what we'll do is, I think we should pencil, let's see. If you're going to make changes, Robert, based on Liz's comments?
Correct.
So what I suggest we do is, that's right, to DC planning, sorry. So what I suggest we do is wait to put you on until we receive a new submission from your revised submission, and then we'll get you on. And at that point, it's likely that we can set a public hearing. And I hope by that point that we're actually meeting physically. But if not, our first dry run for a workshop meeting. Now that we've had it, I know how it can happen. I think we're okay. And we'll have we should be able to have our first public hearing, the first meeting in May for
June.
in June, sorry, for the Verizon cell phone tower at the Anderson Center for Autism. That'll get us a public hearing under our belts as well, so we can then move forward if we have to keep doing this virtually. Anybody else have any comments? Then Scott and Robert, again, thank you. Thank you for all your efforts. Thank you for your time this evening. And we'll look forward to moving this forward.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
The next item on the agenda is PLT storage yard reconstruction. This is the large building that's located at 501-503 Salt Point Turnpike that was subject to fire. The applicants were given a conditional site plan approval in which to reconstruct the building and make other site plan improvements. They have requested a second time in which to extend to meet those conditions and have offered a nice rationale. No one had any comments on this, so I'm not sure again who has this resolution. Sorry.
I do.
Thank you.
Resolution granting second extension of time to satisfy the conditions of site plan and special use permit approval. PLT storage yard reconstruction. April 15th, 2020. Resolution number 2019-19C. Whereas, now therefore it be resolved, the planning board hereby grants of time in which the site plan review and include August 1, 2020.
Is there a second?
Second, Stephanie Wasser.
And Ms. Whitman, can you please call the roll?
Yes. Ms. Weiser,
Yes.
Ms. Wasser,
Yes.
Mr. Pickett,
Yes.
Mr. Oliver,
Yes.
Ms. DiNapoli,
Yes.
Vice Chair Dexter,
Yes.
and Chairman Dupree.
Yes. The motion carries unanimously. We wish them luck in getting this job done. The last item on the agenda, we're going to reset a public hearing for Riverview re-subdivision. As a reminder, this is to create a new parcel on 6 Dock Street. Also, as a reminder, we had set a public hearing for this initially, and then we canceled them under the under the orders of Supervisor Rohr and the governor when we were ordered to start self-distancing. Now that we know that we can do these meetings virtually, I'm going to ask for a motion, or I will make a motion to reset the public hearing for, let me rephrase that. I'll ask for a motion to set the hearing for June 17th, 2020. This would give us a time to have an actual public hearing for Verizon and then a public hearing where we may have public participation at a meeting today or a virtual meeting today. Councilman Krupnick and Supervisor Rohr, Victoria, and I, Tad, and Warren Raplansky, the town attorney, all had a discussion about how we think this should be handled. We couldn't come to a conclusion yet about people pre-registering versus people wanting to call in the night of. So we'll work on that a little bit more. In the meantime, who would make the motion to reset the public hearing for June 17th? Can I not assign that out? Let me make the motion.
Yes, Brent.
Mr. Pickett, you're making the motion.
I make the motion.
And the second?
Second.
Mr. Oliver. Ms. Whitman, can you please call the roll?
Yes. Ms. Weiser,
Yes.
Ms. Wasser,
Yes.
Mr. Pickett,
Yes.
Mr. Oliver,
Yes.
Ms. DiNapoli,
Yes.
Vice Chair Dexter,
Yes.
Chairman Dupree.
Yes.
All right.
And there being no other items on the agenda, may I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved, Stephanie
Second.
Wasser.
Second, Ann Dexter.
Ms. Whitman, can you one more time call the roll?
Ms. Weiser,
Yes.
Ms. Wasser,
Yes.
Mr. Pickett,
Yes.
Mr. Oliver,
Yes.
Vice Chair Dexter,
Yes.
and Chairman Dupree.
Absolutely. Thanks all my colleagues. Thanks everyone for listening in. It's an extraordinary time, but we're
Thanks.
turning town business forward. Thank you again.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Neil.
Everybody take care.
Good night.
Adios.
Bye-bye.